2024.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Welcome. I'm glad you guys are all here. Our day is going to look just like it did a month ago. I know sometimes remembering a month ago is a little difficult, but we're going to be in two table groups. The purpose of our time together is to connect our boundary team, our board members, and in this case we have a community member that's joined us today, and so he's sitting in, he's got data just like we all do. But the purposes of our time is to look at data that we've collected from this last round of data collection. This has been our third round. We have collected data on a new scenario A, it's modified. We have scenario D, which we've collected, this is our second round, no changes from the last time. And two new scenarios we were asked to make, scenario E and scenario F. Additionally, we're going to collect any requests for additional information this afternoon that you guys would like our boundary team to either find out or you might give us some directives about what you would like us to do as far as next steps. So that's our purpose for today. Here's what our agenda looks like. 4:30, we're off and running. We have table 1 and table 2. We have the designated time from about 4:35 to 5:15. We have 4 scenarios this time, so I didn't break the time into 2 20-minute chunks. We just have this time to look at the data we've collected on all 4 scenarios. And then we're going to close with the See, Think, Wonder. That's the very last sheet. All of your papers are organized. You'll see a table of contents. They are all organized by table of content. There is nothing new from last time. It's going to the organization of our data is just like last time. And a reminder, our See, Think, Wonder is this just helps. This is a graphic organizer. We use it in classrooms all the time. It's a great organization feature that we use for students, we use for adults, we use for learners. So the See, Think, Wonder is, as you're going through this data, what are the things that you see? What are you thinking that's going on, and what are you wondering? For us to look at what your responses to this were over the last couple of weeks is great because it gives us an idea of what you're thinking about and what we can do to help serve you. So that's just a reminder of what that graphic organizer is. As a reminder, you all have this data. I just want to very quickly go through what we have. This is scenario A, modified 326. What that means is we made changes to this on March 26th. Here is the data that corresponds with that scenario A that's been modified. Scenario D. At this point in time, this is our longest running scenario. Scenario D was a creation after scenario 1, where we took B and C and combined it to this. And the demographics that accompany scenario D. Our 2 new scenarios. This is boundary scenario E. You will see that in boundary scenario E, what we have done is we have taken core downtown. This was an original scenario that our boundary team looked at in, I think, November and December. We opted as a team not to take this to the community because we thought we had others that would work better. But this is an original. We have the core downtown and Twain. The only thing that we've done differently from our original that our team looked at in November is that we grabbed more neighborhoods up in the northwest corner in order to better fill the Chiawana boundaries. So you have this paper copy. Additionally, you have the corresponding demographics that go with it. And to point out very quickly is the demographics here do shift a little bit at Pasco. The other 2 scenarios had about an 86 to 87 or 85% free and reduced lunch rate. This scenario does alter it to a 79%. Chiawana would be at that 61% almost, and Sageview is right at 50%, 49.99. Well, that's what those demographics look like with that scenario. And then scenario F. Scenario F is kind of a modified current scenario or boundary, you can see this dark line is our current high school boundary that we're operating under right now. You have the core of Pasco minus Frost. Frost is up at Sageview. You have the current part of Twain that is currently attending Pasco High School, and McGee. So when the board had asked us to provide some scenarios that did a better job of balancing our demographics, we came up with scenario F here. Scenario F puts Pasco High at 75% free and reduced lunch, Chiawana at 61%, and Sageview at 53, almost 54%. So those last two scenarios were the directive that we were given when we talked in March 26th, and those are the two scenarios that we came up with and collected feedback on. So this evening, as we look at these scenarios, the question will be, will we need to narrow the number of scenarios that are brought forward for board consideration? So that's something the board can think about today. The other piece of feedback we got was community feedback from the third round and second round, actually, has suggested the following considerations for our final approval at the board, and that's some kind of boundary flexibility plan that would offer an opportunity for our students and families to have some choice in selecting the school that will best support their educational needs. So those are a couple things that we're considering. Board action is tentatively scheduled to begin at the first board meeting in May, so May 14th. I will be providing a board report. And then on May 28th, I will follow that May meeting up with a request for action. So some of the things to think about is, do you want us to narrow down any of these scenarios? Are you going to narrow them down? What additional information might you need from the boundary team to prepare for that situation and that decision? And then ultimately, how many scenarios would you like to consider in this final recommendation? Okay, so that's kind of our purpose and layout. A quick review. Before I jump into anything, a couple of quick introductions. I would like, Spencer Montgomery has been working with our partner. He is our long-term facility planning team, also our engineer for JUB, and Spencer has some updated forecast numbers that Robin and I are going to pass out as he kind of gives a quick review. Spencer, you want to come up and give us a quick update? Just long-term forecast, what our schools could look like according to scenario in the next couple of years. Well, that's not me, that's Spencer.
So this is the third time we've actually done long-range forecasting for Pasco School District. We first did it in 2019 and again 2021, and we prepared it for 23 and prepared a description of all our work and met with your staff, and they said, but there's some other things going on that we're not sure if we fully captured. So we went back and pulled some more data, and there's been additional platting that has occurred this year. So we're gonna rework this a little bit, but the numbers that you have in front of you reflect our best forecasts for the future based upon what we know as of April this year with some new plats that have been started out there. So, and also just so you know, we've used some data that was given to us by the school district that's used in other long-term planning, and there was a couple of different, what we call student generation rates. And we discussed those with your staff and said, well, which one of these should we use? They're quite a bit different. And so we ended up creating an average of the high and the low and used the average rates for the numbers that you see here. And what those end up generating, can I leave a piece of paper? Is about 600 students in the next 3 years or so, and about that many in the 5 years after that, and then about 1,200 in the 10 to 20 year time period. So it's a little under 3,000 students to expect in the next 20 years. Okay, 3,000 students. Okay, but don't forget that you'll also notice on some of the other papers that you have there are that we're going to have about 1,100 seats open with Sageview. So that would mean probably another high school in about 20 years. If that makes sense. I'll be here and answer any of your questions. I'm not going to get into a lot of details, but what we've tried to account for is plats, which means there's developments that are ready to go. They have approvals from the city, they can start building. Pre-plats are developments that are in the process of working with the city to get approvals, so they can't build just yet, but they're close and interested in doing that. Other land that's within the urban growth boundary that does not have any formal development plans moving forward for the city, we have made a set of assumptions to try to estimate based upon the type of zone that they are in, whether it would be apartments or higher density based upon the city's comprehensive land use plan, to estimate how many units would go within that, and then we've used the average student generation rates. So you have a table there that has, and we've applied those to each of the 4 alternative scenarios in different time periods going into the future. A lot of numbers, and we can answer details, questions if you have any. Yes, sir?
This is 5, 10, 20 years from this year.
Yes. Yes.
Not
And-
5 from 2026.
No, 5 from today. 5, or from, this year. And they are additive, right? So we're not double counting, it's the cumulative for each of those future years. All right?
Okay. And before I make my next introduction, we have, I wanted you to be able to look at the second page right after the table of contents. It looks just like this. It's a summary, and I'm going to have Mrs. Kobalik come up and walk us through this summary. Our boundary team has been doing a lot of work as far as mining information. I can assure you and the community that every piece of data, every piece of feedback the community has submitted has been looked over multiple times. Now, this is very important. This tool here allows you to look at 2 things. It allows you to look at what is the community as a whole saying, which is important, right? We're just talking about a net, quote unquote, vote for what they like. What also is important is one of these columns will show you what the neighborhood or what a school neighborhood is preferring. And I think that's equally as important. We do know in our community we might have more voices that are louder, that are more likely to provide input on a feedback, or more likely to call or email and say, hey, listen, you need to be doing it this way. But I also think it's important to look at neighborhoods that it might be more quiet, that are more laid back, that are less likely to provide feedback, and see what voices we're getting from there. Okay, so I'm going to have Heather, Ms. Kobalik, come up and walk us through this. This is the second time that we've had this kind of one-pager. I think it is a really, really great way that she has organized this data so you can take a peek very quickly at a lot of information.
Thank you. So, yeah, as he said, you all have in front of you all the survey comments. It's lots and lots of pages, which you are welcome to read them all. But I did take time to go through and just organize them by guiding principle. How many times was each guiding principle mentioned? So these first 2 sets of columns, scenario A, D, E, and F, how many times for scenario A, how many times did someone say that proximity was a good thing, that they thought we did a good job of that? That's 1 tally mark in the pro column. How many times did someone say proximity, we did not meet that benchmark in scenario A? That's the tally in the con column. And I just went through with all the comments, and if they mentioned more than 1 guiding principle, they got tallies in both of those guiding principles. So you can kind of see overall what people thought of individual scenarios. But you'll see that, for instance, scenario D, we had 11 people say proximity was really good, and we had 19 say it was really bad. How do you have so many people thinking opposite? In large part, it's because they're looking at this neighborhood is going to the closest school, so this is a great scenario. Someone else is looking at a different neighborhood. It's not going to the closest school, so they're saying it's not good. So then I just wanted to see kind of overall, what are people looking for? So the third column says total comments regarding each guiding principle So just adding them all up. Who was commenting on any guiding principle, good or bad? And then I have them listed most to least. So proximity, by far, got the most comments. Then transportation, which is related to proximity, but there are some nuances where they don't go together. Miscellaneous is just where someone said, I like scenario A, and doesn't give a reason. Then demographics, feeder schools, enrollment numbers, minimized impact, and safety. So just again, giving us an idea, what is the community looking for? What's most important to them? The last two columns, so you all have, again, you have these pages that show when someone filled out the survey, they had to say what neighborhood they lived in. So then we went through, and if they lived in neighborhood A1, how many of them said they like scenario A best? How many said they like scenario D best? So you have this. I just combined it all into these tables. The first table is the number one vote by elementary school. So just combining the whole elementary schools. But as Mr. Stickles said, you'll notice some of these elementary schools, like Franklin has over 100 votes total. Livingston has about 150 votes total. Those schools are going to the same high school in every single scenario. So while we want to hear the whole community, I don't feel like those votes should be given as much weight as the neighborhoods that are changing between scenarios. So we went through and just found the neighborhoods that change and looked at, okay, what scenario did they pick? And then in that scenario, what high school is that neighborhood going to? So that's the very last table.
Can you show us where that is?
Right here.
Oh, this little.
Yep, this little one. So these are the neighborhood, or these, so I didn't divide it by neighborhood because it was too much information, but the schools that have neighborhoods that change. For the most part, it's the whole school, but Columbia River, some of Columbia River is always going to Chiawana, some is always going to Sageview, and then there's like 6 neighborhoods that switch in the scenarios. So only those 6 neighborhoods are in this last table because they're the ones that change. Okay, so these numbers aren't going to necessarily match the vote by whole elementary. So Chess, Columbia River, Frost, McGee, Robinson, Twain, and Whittier Curry, those are the schools that change in the different scenarios. Every other school, unless we come up with a brand new scenario, is going to be at the same high school in all 4 scenarios. Anyway, so that's our last one, and just kind of gives us an idea, okay, the people that are being affected the most by this, what are they choosing? What are they seeing as what matters? Any questions?
How would you view that table? How would you use that table? It looks fairly even across the bottom.
Yes,
doesn't it?
I agree. And so I think it's interesting that when you look at overall votes, scenario D got the most by far, right? 680 votes. The second closest was 276. But when you look at the neighborhoods affected by it, it is very split between the schools. So I think we need community input. We need to listen to community, but most of them have not been in these meetings, have not done, don't know all the nuances behind it. I think a lot of people look at scenario D and say, oh, that's really pretty, right? We've got our 4 colors and they're all divided nicely. That looks like a really nice map. Without recognizing that, oh, in this scenario, we're busing kids that were walking in another scenario, or, some of the downsides of it. So, I guess what I'm saying is I don't think it's as clear cut as just saying this scenario got the most votes, so that's what we need to pick. But beyond that, I don't have the right answer of what we do need to pick. Other questions?
Just that last table was the one that I was really looking at.
Yeah.
And it looks so evenly split, so that makes me wonder that maybe we're doing a good job.
No, what it's just saying is, if you look at Chess, the ones that are switching, you look at individual schools, basically, is kind of what you're looking at. Like Chess wants, because Chess wants to go to Pasco High according to all the scenarios. Where Columbia River, they would rather go to Sageview. It's not, it don't really matter I don't think that bottom number,
Yeah,
because it's by individual
right.
schools.
Yes, yeah, it's not by the scenarios. Because if you had, like McGee in the 4 scenarios is going to 3 different schools. So what you really want to know is what school do they want to be at, not what scenario do they like best. Because if they want to be at Sageview, there's 2 scenarios where they're voting for that, right? Well, there's only one where they're voting for Chiawana and one where they're voting for Pasco High.
So Columbia River Elementary School is, very strongly Sageview High School, but Columbia River Elementary School has some parts that are almost right next to Sageview High School. Is this only the kids that are switching?
Yes.
Or is this the
So the
whole
neighborhood
entire-
by the river in all 4 scenarios is at Chiawana, so those numbers are not here in this final column.
So in this final column?
But if you look at Columbia River in this third table, they had 170 votes. But a lot of those families are going to Chiawana every single time. So they're not included in the last table.
Oh, only the ones that switch?
Only the ones that switch.
Kowalik, as a
Yes.
visual, this scenario right here, we're talking about these neighborhoods
Yep.
because this was a quick snapshot. It's the only scenario where all of a sudden these neighborhoods, in every other scenario we offered, they were in Chiawana, or I'm sorry, they were in Sageview. Now all of a sudden, these 6 neighborhoods now have a split option, and that's what Mrs. Kowalik, she only grabbed them in an opportunity to amplify their voice, because what she's been saying is, we can look at the whole. If we just looked at the whole and it was a vote, D is gonna run very quickly. She wanted to make sure we hear the voice of these neighborhoods, that it's not an easy choice for them.
Yes.
They've got multiple places depending on the scenario. Is that
Yep.
a quick visual of
Yes,
that?
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for me before I sit down?
Awesome, thank you. All right, enough of us. We have a lot of stuff to work through. Robin, Spencer, myself, we are just kind of walking around. If you want to get your visual, I'm not giving you homework. You don't have to use the graphic organizer. But if it helps you, it would be great for you to use it, because I will ask to collect it at the end. It does help us to collect your thoughts a little bit. Other than that, the time is ours for about the next 20 minutes to look at this data and for you to ask questions as your team. Every table has community members, boundary team members, building representatives, and board members. So please, jump into it.
I hate all of them. And they keep getting worse every go around. I don't think we need to look. I think we need to worry about it. It gets all screwed up. And there is going to be another elementary school out here. Columbia River is going to get split up. would have to be.
So as the community grows, I guess, like, would our change as well with the community grows? Because Sageview, I mean, no matter almost every scenario, it's gonna.
They haven't changed too much. Yeah, so the idea would be to get it as close as we can get it, and why not just keep adding.
But like we live out north of Taylor Flats, off Elder, and there's been times that our
Yeah.
So then you could stay ahead of, the other thing is along the lines of that.
Yeah.
Because I think the route through this is figuring out how to do two or three, or two.
Yep.
Because then you're doing elementary boundaries.
like to me the most this section.
So it means, they're gonna create a new elementary school, and they, who knows exactly this option. Okay.
Oh, yes, right, yeah.
It's.
Because like, in that case, yeah, well, in that case, like, if it were Ochoa Stevens, the demographics in those four high schools would be drastically Sageview, Chiawana, and the new high school would have much better demographics.
So when you're right. Goes to Chihuahua, Chihuahua.
Another classic example.
Right.
And what you're carried here is 44 PHS, so it's slightly more PHS than CHS.
Yeah, so it's useless.
Yeah, no, I was about to say these.
The maddening thing to me is, using this chart, there is a school in each one of the maps which does not get what they want.
Yeah, because like Chess,
At least one.
Chess and Frost, none of them voted.
Yeah, the only one where they both can, where they go to Pasco High and both walk.
The scenario A does give the two largest groups.
But I think people don't like it because they see this blue over
Here's
here.
everything.
Oh, we're busing across the street. But we're busing.
The 100 is
They don't, they
Plain
don't bus to Pasco High.
and the McGee.
So they're either gonna be bus to Pasco High or Chihuahua. Chess and Frost, you need to walk to Pasco High, we can be bus to Chihuahua. So all the other scenarios are increasing our total number of buses.
I just think A and D are still our two best.
FR, FR.
based on if we don't get a fourth high school, for example, that
In 20 years.
in 20 years, we don't have a fourth high school, Sage will have option A, 2,993 students.
But it can't, I mean, of the 30 that
As
vote.
I was saying here, what I like about what turned out.
I don't feel like any of those numbers are like, we can be confident that that's what we're doing. It's just too small this. For chess and.
These lower income schools, not many of them funded.
That's the average.
And I didn't get that from here, but maybe I haven't talked enough to parents, but they were just like, they were like, why are you doing this to our kids?
With these neighborhoods, honestly, I think, so that's what I think. as
Well, Whittier
It's like,
County is
yeah,
Austin is
not a
very
big number,
split,
but-
very, very split.
I mean, you work in these rooms. You've seen comments.
That was because of all the, this number right here is how many people said they liked that scenario the best. That was the number picked. These right here is if they left a comment, what did that comment regard?
Many of them may not have left the comment.
So only 30 left a comment
Yep.
about proximity. Or only, so out of the 680 that liked scenario D, if you add up these totals, there's 40, 50, 60, 69 people only left a comment.
I think a lot of this information is contradictory, some of it's useless.
So to me, that somewhat, I mean, it's hard,
Right.
Right.
But those aren't, they aren't the same. What we're really saying is that everybody can comment on the scenario, but they can only vote on
To me, the thing that I'm looking at here is, here you've got number one selection, one back. But then you've got scenario A that meets these two problems that they struggle with. Which would work with A. But then A didn't score so much, so then you can say, well, how much do I rate these, or cost compared to these?
Yeah.
see if we go,
Well,
Oh, yeah, so everybody has different reasons. Like, there's certain scenarios, you're like,
we're closest one.
scenario A and scenario D are like, looks really nice.
Let me ask
But
you
then you
this.
look at the demographic numbers,
Which
and
one's
it's like,
closest proximity, A or
completely
B?
changes.
Uh,
And it's
A or B, which one is the
pretty
strong
rough.
proximity?
And, same with like, I think this
I would,
scenario
Whittier
D
Curie is at Pascal High, so to me, that one would be
just
D.
because their demographics are kind of, same with F.
The priority there is proximity.
F as well.
I think
Demographics even out much better now.
I figure, I know.
Yeah, well, there's an impact
That will vote bus.
in every situation.
Yep.
It doesn't matter which one you pick.
Yeah.
There's a direct
And that's huge too.
If you go strictly
That one is like McGee, and very, very, very vocal about.
So they don't answer the proximity.
That's the biggest concern for me.
Number
Yeah.
one by far, like 5-1.
Yeah.
So, and I don't want to overfill here. I think we're doing the thing I don't like about here is you're not filling.
Was there anything we chose a scenario which puts in place?
Well, and that's right.
Yeah.
I forget the exact numbers, but if you said every, like,
So this far from
Can't go by that.
which of, you know, you have to pick some neighborhoods that feel like it's
So this was,
Pasco. So that's where you start saying, who does it make sense to say?
This section here, they're about the same, about 300-ish.
this scenario, Ian, some of us,
Yeah.
No, most of you guys are close to the same.
it's pretty 50-50, but I was on
Numbers.
Robinson's radar.
This area and this one.
Yeah.
They were Pasco High. So I don't know that they took the attention.
It would be similar to.
Just right here, because this section right here is 288 and McGee is 348.
HS.
So I, yeah, if we still narrow it down to A and G.
Yeah.
Or we
HS,
modify
and there's a
it.
good chance a lot of people HS.
Because really, these people,
It'll
if,
make,
Are there any scenarios?
Well, to be honest, in this case, as well as demographics, I expect a lot of the kids at Pasco High to go to other schools anyways.
At some point, you have
to be
to
honest,
probably
with the,
take the information we have.
I mean, because of sports,
Only thing
because
would
of
But it-
safety
but it-
issues,
be, if you did
because
that,
of,
then you'd say,
I mean, most of these kids
Yeah, we're gonna pass it on, but.
aren't reading and writing at level or even close
and the
to,
ones over there.
right, they're way below level.
well, these ones, most of these ones did switch in that last one.
It's a little bit more balanced, because honestly, like,
3,000.
It's almost except for
if
it
I had a
takes down
say,
here
I would
too.
be right, you know,
Yeah.
with these demographics, with the elementary schools are looking like, because I work in these schools, you know, and I have.
But that one has
where do you work?
Whittier,
I'm
Curry
at-
going way over here.
Lowest.
And are you a teacher?
I'm,
And that might be the reason, because these folks are
Great,
traveling.
nice to have you here.
Mhm.
so yeah, I don't know, I guess it would be a little concern
just-
to me.
I guess in my opinion, whatever one we choose,
I don't know, but the
Whittier, Curry
busing, yeah, it is a
will
big
not
issue, because
go
I do
across
hear
town
like,
again.
when you have kids coming over here, they're like, why do we come here when, you know what I mean, I live close, but.
I'd be still surprised.
I think, I don't,
It's A, if they do go across town.
yeah. And that's,
Yeah.
I mean, some of those bus stops for the high school, they're getting on the bus at 5:50, 6 o'clock in the morning.
From over here?
Yep,
Are they really?
when they're going to Chiawana
What time is the high school?
It
start?
has-
at 7:30, 7:40. That's a long bus ride, over an hour bus ride.
Hey Jake, how long has the public been marinating with ENF?
Since March 28th. And it closed, end of business on April 19th, which was last Friday. Yep. Every one of the scenarios has been 3 weeks. We've run it
So
at a
do we
3-week
narrow it down to two?
cycle, because that's the time we can get in between
Well,
board
eventually
meetings.
you'll have to narrow it down to one. So, I mean,
The direction that you're going to ask, see what information you can use to make a decision, and then how many scenarios would you like to consider? And then the staff. Discuss and so that's what we're doing. Is for additional information and then how many scenarios we
just want to hear what everybody else has to say. I don't want to be the one that says, this is what we're doing.
No, and but we just need direction, because right now we have 4. That's too much, I think, to go into a final
If everybody's
decision.
good with D, I'd go with D, but if not everybody's happy with D,
And it might help for you to discuss that for a few minutes, to say, what are everybody's impressions at this point, right?
right,
To be able to narrow it down to.
No.
we could do one, or do one, or choose one. But I'm happy to let guys marinate on two. What's the other table?
Okay, all these are looking good. I mean, they're not gonna lose funding.
A gives you the most for future for safety. And it does have the 2 negative areas.
And like, no matter what, I'd say the proximity is not,
That makes them happy.
because even,
The one that everybody selected.
because even in,
I think we could get a lot of
even in
trouble.
E, like, this is,
The one that everybody selected.
this makes,
Does that
I
make
think that's
sense?
gonna be.
So you have to make a choice, which, that's a great choice if you make it. I don't think it, I think that's
so,
one-sided. I mean, you just have to realize one of those choices.
If it was close, I could argue.
remember it as, like, working.
And this information is going to be public to
And I love these kids, it's not that I don't
for the community.
It does make a difference.
So if they see, if we do something that's totally opposite of what they're
Security
saying,
guards and, you know,
you're gonna have,
and.
you're gonna hear people. Whether you want to or not.
So, you know, so in other words, I think we could decrease their workload if we can all agree on it.
Same with chess.
But I just,
Still pretty split.
I just,
What school was that?
None of those 3 is like really definitive, and it's really not statistically significant. It's still numbers. So,
Not a landslide.
you know, it's about the same.
Well, but those, switching these ones is, you have to bring,
McGee,
to change the contract.
right.
You don't bring them in.
So what kind of information do you want?
It's a swap, yeah.
That's the real difficult, I think that's the biggest, the problem here is like, what do we choose, proximity or demographics, right?
here, there's,
You can't even choose.
You know, so.
Well, I mean,
You
but
can't even
just like we're
choose
discounting other
proximity or
numbers,
demographics. We need another East Hampton
there was a
school
large
to-
number,
to-
I mean,
To choose Denver.
over 30 that said Pasco High, 37
is not big enough
that said
for
Pasco High.
proximity.
Versus 72 and 100.
No, right, but I mean, we're discounting the other 30 at Frost, so it's like,
From reading the comments, I think most of the 37 are there right now.
was there something that went out beforehand? I know there was where you could send in your thoughts for the names, but I don't remember. Well, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So what if we went with B and then we went with, that flexibility plan that you were talking about? How hard is it, you know, they were talking about some of the flexibility, so if those that are upset about going to, would rather go to Sage U instead of C1.
See, but the only thing with scenario E is like, all these other high schools in 20 years.
I
are
think
gonna
it would be wise
capacity.
to wrap up our
That's just
thoughts here in the
gonna be
next minute so that we can share out. So let's take 2
I'm just
minutes.
saying, they're gonna be under their brick and mortar, where Chuana and Sageview are gonna be way over.
And the only slight increase with A, Pasco High would give you
You can't.
Yeah.
A would give you a slight advantage, but just not that significant to me that.
We have
Plan something that's gonna last. So we're gonna make this really.
I think,
in scenario F, both Tijuana and
I
Sage
guess I wanna know the
are
bus
over
report.
capacity. Chiawanna
what's
is
it gonna be the
significantly
cost?
over capacity,
bus
and
goes
Pasco
in.
Hills is
I think that's
under capacity. 10 years, that's not very long.
And F will have by far the
Thing on
most
A and D.
busing, which we already have busing.
She's like, okay.
And scenario
This is where you earn your big
is the
bucks.
same thing for, but only for Chiawanna. The other two are okay.
Okay, I think in order to make sure that we're going to honor our time in the next 12 minutes, if there are thoughts that you would like to share out with the whole group, now would be the time to do that. Please use the mic on your table for that, so we can make sure they get recorded.
Yeah, no, and that's a lot of it, but there was many, many, many comments from Whittier area people saying, my kids can't do sports or extracurricular because we can't get them over there. So that's a huge, right there,
Okay, I remember.
10 years.
you know, and so it's like, that's why
10 years
I'm
they're all-
I
afraid.
want them to be able to do sports.
Yeah, you or, you know, act like leadership or that kind of stuff. So if, I just-
So D fixes that, right?
I just feel like they need to go to one that is at least
And then all of them, Pasco High.
closer where their
capacity.
friends could drive them home or, you know.
This is why you want to ask them. I know you don't want to see.
Yeah, no,
That's where I think
and that's,
those, if we can do the flexibility thing.
First meeting in May.
Okay, let's wrap up our thoughts. And is there things that you want to share out so that both tables can get on the same page?
Make decisions too.
Well,
I think we need to use the mic. I think just for making sure if anybody's watching online. Thank you.
So, just real quick, can I, you mind if I? Always. Superintendents are like that.
So I just wanted to clarify, and Jake, I'm sorry if I'm stepping on your toes, but as board members, what the group is asking you for is, one, what additional information do you need in order to be able to make a decision? And Dr. Norberg, you talked about wanting transportation times, et cetera. That's a great thing to request, and we can absolutely do that. Then the team is asking for, as we move into May 14th, our goal is to start to narrow the focus for you so that you can make a decision by the end of May. So what we're asking for is how many scenarios would you like to consider for the final recommendation? Not necessarily which scenarios. You as board members have literally seen this data for less than an hour, whereas the boundary team has been up to their elbows in this data and the information for months and months. So that's what the team is asking for in terms of direction tonight.
so they don't want to know the scenarios, they just want the numbers.
Tonight, we're only asking for the scenarios, how many scenarios you would like. And that really is just in fairness to the board to not kind of back you into a corner to have to pick a scenario tonight based on, again, you just saw this information. If you want to talk about individual scenarios, certainly I'm not going to silence you as a board member, but the direction that we need is how many scenarios do you want in your final recommendation?
When we did the Chiawanna boundary, you don't know what scenarios they recommended?
I do not know in the Chiawanna scenario. I do know in the last boundary scenario that we did since I've been superintendent that there were 3 that were part of the final recommendation.
Colleagues, I'm speaking for myself. I would support actually keeping these 4 in place until the next meeting in May, when we would narrow it down to 2, and then in the final meeting in May, late May, we would then choose between the 2 finalists. And what perhaps the district staff could do with its engagement with the public is make it known that in the next meeting in May, we will definitely cut these 4 down to 2, with the final decision between the 2 finalists in the final week of May. And I say that process because I'm hoping that this will crystallize with the public that the time for decision-making is now, and these are the options, and it's time to, if you feel strongly about this, that you come and you express your voice either in written form or verbally between these 4 options in early May, and then the final 2 on decision day in late May, in the second meeting of May. That's my suggestion.
I have one question. How long is it going to take to do the busing thing? If in the scenario that John mentioned, would that be enough time to do that? Or do we need to narrow it down before then for that?
Well, I would probably defer to Mrs. Whitney. I mean, having 4 scenarios to do an entire like rundown of what it costs transportation-wise. We know what we're currently operating at. And I think we've got Mr. Sital here as well, but I think that's a big lift, but I don't live in that world of transportation or forecasting. Mrs. Whitney?
I think you answered it perfectly. I would need to ask how long that would take to do for 4 scenarios.
You know, I'm okay narrowing it down to 2 personally. And then go from there, and then allow you to take more time to figure out the details on those 2 is my suggestion. A and D. I mean, yeah, A and D. To give them more time to do that. But I'll open it up to everybody else.
What do you think, Steve?
I don't really have much to add. I think a lot of it's been said. I think what John said is, I don't have a problem with that. As far as I understand it, John's asking for 2 scenarios at the final decision, but we go forward with the 4 extended till into next month. As for information that I want to see, I need more time to sit down with this information and just unpack what's here. I think busing would be okay to know. I don't know, off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything else, other information.
What do you think, Amanda?
I think I want to hear from the public at board meetings, which I would like to see if the board would agree to direct district staff to put out communication to please show up to the board meetings and give feedback on these, so we can see the public and hear what they're saying about the 4.
Can you hold separate hearings for?
In the past, we've had boundary hearings that we've done regionally that we don't do during a school board meeting. We do, we do like, anyway, we do them outside, almost like a forum, and you can have all the board members there because it can be publicly advertised that we're there. It is advised that the board members don't congregate and talk because we're not making decisions at those meetings, but we have done that in the past.
I'm more for, sorry.
Yes.
Having done the last round of boundaries, we had a lot of public meetings that time. We had a lot of public meetings this time. We had way more people show up the last round than this, and I think a lot of that's because we've had these surveys electronically out. It's easier to fill out, and people fill it out and say, okay, my voice is being heard. So I don't know that a public meeting where we ask people to come that we're going to get a better overall view of what the community thinks. We're going to get the very passionate people, but I don't know that it's actually going to give us better information than what we have.
As a quick summary, and you'll see this in the board tonight, is we've had over 4,500 responses in our in our 3 rounds. So we've had 67 different public meetings. I believe that the word has gotten out there. We will absolutely do what you want. I just wanted to give you that data point now, knowing that in an hour you're going to see that slide that kind of gives you a summary of the feedback we've already collected.
I would second what she was saying about you're going to get the loud and the boisterous ones, but you're not going to get a better feel for what's going on than what we've got right here. And so you're basically creating a show.
I have a major problem with E and F. I realize that the demographics are better, and I love that. But we've already done E and F in a sense, because we've done this donut hole type thing, and we've had all I've heard for the last 15 years is you better not do another donut hole. And I think that's pretty clear in the fact that 680 people voted for D, 276 voted for A. They're very similar. And we have 185 for E and 256 for F. I mean, if we're going to keep 3, we can keep F because it's clearly, you know, the winner over E. But my other major problems with both E and F is in 10 years, we have both Chihuahua High School and Sageview High School over capacity in one of the scenarios. And in the other scenario, we have all of that overcrowding all at Chihuahua High School. And that's just not acceptable to me. In 10 years, I don't want to see one high school that's 50% over capacity or 35% over capacity, and the other one's at capacity. I don't think that's equity for our students. So I think that's critical. I think 4 is too many to take again to the community. 4 is a lot. I think it's harder to get your mind wrapped around 4. If we're going to do 3, then I say we get rid of E, or we just go to A and D, the 2 most popular. A and F are only 20 apart, so I would be okay with doing those 3. But honestly, I will never support F. I will never support it. And I am adamant about that because of everything I've heard from the community through Donut Hole situation. Don't want to do that again. And I am not going to take all those kids from Robeson and take them out of a walking school district and take the number one thing that they wanted in proximity and bus them clear across town. I don't have as hard of a time busing Whittier because of the situation of where it is. They're on the other side of the tracks. The tracks make a major difficulty to get over. They have to get on the freeway or they have to go down and then get to, I can't think that busing Whittier is going to add more than 5 minutes to those kids' commute. I have much easier time with busing Whittier. I'm fine with that scenario, or the one that doesn't bus them, but I won't bus Robinson. I just won't. And I've had some very pointed conversations with some of the parents at Robinson. So I have some strong feelings like that, but those are feelings that have been developing over the last many years since I've been on the board and since I've lived in Pasco. I moved here in 2010. So those are my opinions on those scenarios. So we need, as a board, to come up with where we're going. How many of you, so we have a choice to go all 4 back and let them come back with 2. I think coming back with 2 is great, and it seems like everyone was in agreement with that. Is everyone all right with having them decide on 2 and coming back with 2? The committee and going back out to the public?
I am seeing some shake of heads on the boundary team.
Okay.
That's a lot to put on the boundary team. And I'm just as an advocate for them as I'm like reading body languages. Now, if you're going to direct us to do that, we'll say yes. I think we're probably more aligned with going with 3 and eliminating 1.
Okay.
Because I'm trying to, as a mediator between, we have community, you know, they're doing a lot of work on this that I think puts them in a terror is the wrong word I'm thinking, but it's definitely a scary place.
Okay. So what do you think would be best with the boundary team? They have done an immense amount of work. What do you think would be best for them right now?
I'm looking at the boundary team. I just was reading body languages very quickly, and I wanted to jump in before we
Would the
pull
boundary
trigger.
team be okay with us going back with 3, or would they rather us go back with 2 or make a decision more quickly?
I feel I would like to have 2, just because the more you get, you can only pick your best. The one, you can only pick one that you like. Well, if there's 2 that are similar, some people might be like, well, I'd go to either place in these 2. So I don't care which one it is. Well, then but it affects these people. And so it's, I think if we can go to say these are our final, give us your thoughts, opinions on 2, it'd be best. But it would be less, there'd be less disbursement of the thoughts in numbers.
Can we play this out? So if we're hypothetically, if we said to the boundary committee, we select the next meeting, maps 1 and 2, then what does the committee do for the next 2 or 3 weeks for the 1 and 2? Just recompile the data into the reorganized presentation?
Well, I guess another thing too is just looking at some of the numbers. we've got with, you know, the forecast numbers, would you want us to try to make Sageview smaller? Would you want us to add, is there anything you would want to see maybe with numbers? I mean,
So in essence, what you're doing is we can more define what we want, and it's easier on them, I guess, to provide. They can mess with those numbers. I mean, that's what I see the benefit would be.
If I was going to put my name behind F, it would have to be with Robison at Pasco High School. So that would be my recommendation, but I haven't heard that from anyone else.
You kind of have two flavors of boundary scenarios. You have several that are proximity-based and several that are demographic-based. If you're asking us to provide and come back with one of each, I think our team could do that if you were asking for two. If we were to go out and then come back with two proximity, and our response was two proximity-based, like that just puts us in a precarious situation, and I don't really think that doesn't really provide much choice for you to vote on when it comes down to that. So we would like to have some boundaries on, or some parameters on what you're looking for.
How do you feel about that, board? If we have them choose one between E and F and one between A and D, the proximity-based and the demographics-based.
I think you lose one of the best ones that you've got, A and D.
And we're under this proposal, we would ask the committee to make that selection of A and D, or A and D, E and F, the committee would make that selection.
If you're asking us to. We're in a spot right now where we're asking, how many scenarios would you like? What is additional information or action you want us to take? We're here to serve, but also let you know kind of like what our bandwidth is and our timeline.
That's a good point.
Yes, go ahead. No.
I was just saying it's a good point that Steve brought up.
What were you going to say?
I have a question and a comment.
You need a microphone. Yep.
You mentioned going back. I just want to clarify that. Are you expecting that something's going to go back to the public, or you mean the boundary committee bringing something back to the board, just for clarification?
Either. I would be fine with either. I mean, I think we need to reduce the number if we're going to go back to the public. I don't think there's any way we go back with 4 to the public. I don't really want to push 4 back to the boundary committee either. And I think that our board is sensitive to that. Do you want only 2, or do you want to keep those A and D and one of the two demographics?
Okay, and then my comment was, it seems to me like 5 years ago when we did the elementary boundaries, we prepared a list of pros and cons for each of the scenarios, and maybe that would be very helpful to you to kind of summarize at least what the boundary committee sees based upon all the comments and the voting and all that, what the pros and cons would be of either 2 or 3 or 4 scenarios, right? Depending on how you wanted to go forward.
Okay.
But just to follow up on a comment that Steve made, I think, was if you pick one of A and D and one of E and F, it doesn't leave much of a decision for the board unless you're really trying to decide on proximity or something else. And so if you want to consider and maybe discuss that a little bit as to how important is the demographic changes that you get with E and F, as a board, how do you feel about that, right? So,
I know. How does our board feel about it? Are the demographics changes in E and F that important? I mean, like I said, I'm adamantly against those 2, but if the rest of the board feels like they could support those, then we need to bring back E and F. But I have 2 major problems with E and F. One is that we're busing those kids way too far, so we're disrespecting their proximity, and 2, it makes the numbers very heavy on 2 high schools, and actually too light. 1,800 kids is a really nice number for our high schools, and Pasco High School, even at 20 years, is only at 1,500 in one of those scenarios. I just don't think that's, and there's a good chance that we're going to have a good portion of that Pasco High School go to Orion, and then we're like at 1,200 kids. I just think we have lots of issues there if we go with either E and F. So I'd be happy getting rid of both of those.
I would agree that we tried E&F to look to see how important the people would think that that was to them, and to me, it's not that important to them. So I think that we could narrow it down to A and D, put that out in front of the people and say, look, this is coming to the end. You need to vote, because we're going to be taking a vote in our scenarios soon, and throw it out to them one more time. Allow them to get the bus information on it and any other information that would help us to make a decision between A and D, and move forward on the next one.
It would take approximately 10 days per scenario to get busing information.
I do think we've already, survey 2 was A and D, well, we modified A since then. But I don't know that sending another survey out to the public is going to get us more information. I feel like they've been pretty consistent in what they've said every survey. Not, we've changed the scenarios, but what they're saying matters to them has been consistent all the way through. So another survey, I feel like this is going towards burnout. People are, why are you asking me again?
I will say though that if you're giving them two choices and they have to choose one or the other versus if there was a choice that put them, this one here, this one here, this one here, and this one here, they have to choose 4 versus there's only 2.
And they went to a final survey.
Right, so survey 2 was A and D. We
Yeah.
modified A for survey 3, but I think some people will be like, we already voted between A and D. Like,
But there's
why are we?
always been multiple options, so if somebody could have chose, like, oh, I went to this school in either of these scenarios, that skews the numbers.
Hey, if you're going to talk,
Yeah.
we love hearing the committee. Please, please, please talk in the microphone. So, thank you so much for your words. Those are really helpful.
Board
I'm-
President Phillips, we haven't heard from our student reps.
Yes. Please, please use microphones. You don't have to say anything and agree with any of us. We want to hear your opinion and what it is.
Or not, Sam, if you don't feel comfortable.
No, I know, I
And
know.
you don't have to either, no.
I'm just trying to summarize what I wrote. My big thing was just transportation between, I was looking at scenario A and D, transportation, and I know we talked about it here, but transportation was a big thing with when I was looking at the maps. I just feel like that takes a big part of the boundaries and families' concerns. I would just say, like, if we could get, director said about the numbers of, like, if we have a budget with transportation, or like how many families agree with the transportation. I don't know how to word it, but like just transportation is a major thing for me.
Just on that transportation note, there's 2 different questions. One is, what's the total time kids are going to be on a bus? The other is, how many buses do we need? So one of the big differences between A and D is A is busing Whittier Curry all the way across town. We're busing them a farther distance. They will be on the bus a little bit longer. But in scenario D, right, we're making Chess and Frost, who would have walked to Pasco High, now be bused to Chiawana and Sageview. So maybe the total transportation time is a little bit less, but we're still busing Whittier and Curry to Pasco High because they can't walk there either. So now we're using twice as many buses. So it's not just transportation time, but it's number of buses, number of bus drivers. Like it's all those pieces.
Superintendent Whitney, would it take, you said 10 days for the travel time information, would it take also 10 days to determine how many buses as well?
You basically have to route the boundaries to determine what you're asking for. It'll take 10 days per scenario. You basically have to run routes for each scenario so that they're going quickly.
Well, I agree with Dr. Norberg and Ms. Kubalik. I really think we need to know how many buses the scenarios that we decide would take. And for me too, I'd like to know the travel time as well, which based on the length of time this information would take to get to us, I guess, moving forward to the next meeting would be not possible. Yeah.
Miss Ing, I think maybe you grabbed a mic.
So strictly looking at scenario A and D, I feel personally scenario A would be the best route because we see that the McGee families are very strong about wanting to attend the new high school. The only downfall on that is the Whittier Curry getting bused to Chiwana. However, they are currently doing it, so it wouldn't be much of a change for them. But I do feel that we should send McGee to Sageview because they have all been very active in the surveys and have shown us that they do really want to go to Sageview and not Chiwana.
That's Frost? Okay. Oh, McGee, okay.
So I guess my comment would be, are we thinking 2 maps then, going into the next? Is that what we're?
That's what I would suggest.
Ms. Brown and Dr. Kennedy?
I think that sending 2 maps forward and us making a decision, not putting that in the boundary committee is what we should do. As far as demographics, it's always been my argument that we need to take into consideration demographics, but it's clear that the public has spoken in the 3 times we've not that proximity is important to them. And our student reps both make very good points about their observations about the data. I don't think that we need to go out to the public anymore. We've done 3 rounds of public surveys, and we have a lot of comments already, and I feel like at point is the public going to say, well, you're the board, you need to make a decision. So I think that we narrow it down to 2, in my opinion, and then get the transportation data, and then go forward in our board meetings with those 2. The board.
How do you feel about that, John? Or
Dr.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yeah, Board President Phillips, I agree with Vice President Brown that the board should make the decision about what maps are whittled down, if any. The reason why I suggested that we, I guess in a sense, slowed this down a little bit was that this is a lot of information and there's competing tugs over various issues. And to sit with it for about an hour and then make a decision, for me, I'm not comfortable doing that. Board President Phelps, you bring up important points, which I agree with. There are other perspectives that are also competing here, and so my recommendation that we just move the 4 into the next meeting and then make a decision by the 2, and then for the final meeting in May, we make that final decision among the finalists, the 2 finalists, would give at least us some more time with this new information that we just received an hour ago.
Can we if we do that, Dr. Kennedy, would you be able, you don't want to narrow it down to 1 or 2 right now? Or you don't want to narrow it down to 1 right now?
I could compromise and whittle it down to 3, but I think, well, I just don't feel comfortable making a decision right now. I've had a lot of information has fallen in my lap, and speaking for myself, I need more time.
I feel the exact same way.
Okay, so if we narrowed tonight, then, I'm great with that as well. How are you with that, Dr. Nora Berg? Are you okay with narrowing it down to 3 rather than 2 tonight?
Yeah, my biggest concern is if we wait till the next meeting and we've got 14 days for them to do, and it takes 10 days to do one scenario, they're not going to have the time to do the bus stuff.
On 3. We can only do the bus. If we wait till the next scenario, if we want to wait 1 meeting, we have to narrow it down to 2.
So I don't think that's what John was
But even then,
asking.
after that, they don't have enough time, 'cause they've got 2 weeks between meetings, right?
That's not what John's asking. I think
Okay.
John needs to explain it one more time.
Oh, boy.
I'm asking for us to move these 4 until the next meeting in May. We don't make a decision tonight about which ones we eliminate. And Obviously, the staff can only do so much with the time that they're able to do it. So I'm open to even moving our final decision to the first meeting in June, so that staff have plenty of time to provide us with the transportation numbers. And I know that's cutting close to the deadline that Superintendent Whitney has given us, which is the end of June. But, you know, this decision, which is so permanent and so consequential, I think taking an extra 2 weeks, if necessary, is worth it. So my suggestion would be to move these 4 proposals into the next meeting and see where we are with the transportation numbers, and if necessary, continue to postpone until we have all the information and we can make a final decision on the final 2 finalists during the first meeting in June. That's my suggestion.
So, do they need to provide any more information before the next meeting?
I agree with you, Dr. Norberg. I think we need to see bus times, but more specifically, the number of buses each route is going to require.
But Dr. Kennedy, we have to have 10 days for each scenario to get bus times. And that will take another 40 days for all scenarios.
For the next meeting, we wouldn't have all the
40 business
But that-
days.
Right, but that's why he wants to push it to the next end of May.
I'm open to making a final decision in June.
Yep,
Okay.
I agree.
And I disagree. I do not want to send 4 forward. I don't really want to send 3. I am perfectly, honestly, I'm capable of making a decision tonight. I think the public's clearly spoken in this. But I do realize that there are some advantages to A that we're just realizing. And anyway, so, but I want to know what the rest of the board. I am not comfortable moving 4 forward. I would prefer to, but I could compromise at 3.
I don't necessarily perceive what John's saying is moving 4 forward. I think he's asking for more time to study 4 before you're asking him to narrow it down. That's what I'm hearing you say. He's just asking for more time to consider what you're going to narrow down, correct?
And then either in 2 weeks for the next meeting or 4 weeks in late May, we narrow those 4 down to 2.
Yeah,
and then
so if you narrowed it down to 2 in May, we would then could do busing on 2, we could meet the deadline. So
What is?
I just wanted to clarify what I
Okay.
thought I heard you say.
E was by far the least favorite. I just think that there's no way we're going to be adopting E regardless. So getting rid of E now, I don't think is a decision that would be hard to make. And at least narrowing it down to 3. How does the rest of our board feel? We need to come to a consensus. I don't know if we need to go back to the committee. I think they've provided us massive amounts of information. We have massive amounts of data. I think what Dr. Kennedy said is valuable. We do need some more time to kind of sit on this. They've been able to do that more often. But I do feel like, you know, with only 185 people voting for E, I just don't think there's any way it's going to be chosen. So how did the rest of you feel?
I don't have a problem with eliminating E, but then I'm willing to go down to 2, so. And I don't have a problem pushing, I mean, if people need more time, I'm not gonna push it. So as long as we can get the busing stuff done, and Michelle seems to think that we've got the time to do it, we are pushing it down the road, which I don't think is necessary, but if other people think so, then I'm happy to give them the time.
So I just want to say, I agree with John. I think this decision, we're looking at 10-year projections and 20-year projections. I don't think we just rush this. So I need more time to look at the information.
Okay, so you want all 4, not 3?
I don't want to make a decision on how many we need tonight.
Okay. And Mrs. Brown?
So, Board President Phillips, your decision about to get rid of E stems basically from busing Robinson across town to go to Chiawana, yes?
And there's only 185 that voted for that one, so it's by far the least popular. By almost 100, or no, more like 70.
I could support moving forward with 3 and getting rid of E.
Yeah, I could too.
Okay. All right, well, it sounds like there's a consensus on Moving down to 3, let's get rid of E. Let's not make any other decisions tonight so that we can sit on this and take this home and study it. Ms. Whitney, I feel like it would be really valuable to start the busing information. And since we haven't decided on any of the others, we might as well go to the most popular to start with, because we're going to want busing information on all of them. Does that make sense? Or you can start on all of them. I don't care how that works.
Yeah, we'll let Jessica decide.
And then you can do a timeline for us. Do we want to narrow this down to 2 before we make a decision, or are we just going to make a decision from the 3?
Well, Board President Phillips, I just want to confirm, so the consensus is that we would consider, we would do further consideration of scenarios A, D, and F
Yes.
in 2 weeks. Okay, I can support that.
But would we need to come back in 2 weeks, or would we just get the busing information for all 4 of them and come back in 30 days? Yes.
Were you, F is where McGee goes to Pasco High. Or, I thought you had said E before.
I was just looking at the number 1 votes, and there was 185 for E. So, and there was 256 votes for F. So that being the least popular, E being the least popular, that's why I chose to eliminate E. And if anybody wants to eliminate a different one, please let me know.
I think that I'm fine with either receiving the bus information piecemeal based on whatever priority listing that the board agrees to, or waiting to address scenarios A, D, and F when all the bus information is available. Either one's fine with me.
That's-
Whatever is most doable.
So what would you prefer, the rest of the board? I'd love to hear from all of you. Do you want to get this piecemeal, or do you want to just get all of the information? You know what, I'm going to go to you, Mrs. Whitney.
Yeah,
What's the easiest?
I would like to let Jessica put that plan together. She's the expert
Okay.
in routing, so if I would like to have her inform how we do that, and then based on what she says, I can develop a new timeline for decision-making and check in with board officers during agenda setting. But I'm a little nervous about you giving us direction that would make it harder for Jessica. And I just don't know enough about, she's the expert. So if the board could give us that flexibility, I would appreciate it.
Would that work? Can we just hand that over with those 3 scenarios to Jessica? And then let her come up with a timeline of when we'll go over?
Yes.
Mr. Norberg, or Dr. Norberg? Okay. All right, it sounds like that passes unanimously by the board. So let's do that. Come back when Jessica feels like it's most appropriate to bring that back to the board.
So I just want to be clear, the board is not expecting any additional information from the boundary committee, correct?
Right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, boundary committee.
So much.
No.
Yeah, we don't even probably understand how much work you have all done, but I can tell you right now, through the years, we couldn't run without you guys. We cannot do our jobs without the work of these really valuable committees that try to be as objective as possible and try to do what's best for our students, because we just don't have the time to do all of the work that the board requires us, as well as these things. So you are invaluable to the board, and I want you all to know that. And Mr. Sickle, if you can let the rest of the boundary committee know how invaluable they are to the board, we would really appreciate that. We really appreciate the work that they do for us. So thank you. And with that, we are kind of late. So